Okay, recording in progress. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first session of our series of the weekly Parsha class. Not only is it being sponsored by Mitch and Ricky, it was also inspired by them when we began our studies together on the Parsha, and we decided, why would we just keep it to ourselves when we can share it with so many other people? The first session that we have today is entitled The Ark and Dinosaurs and the Age of the Universe. It's a double class, and that's because Bereshit, you don't need that. That's the list of the different sessions that we'll be doing. The reason why we've done two together is firstly because we didn't have a Wednesday after Simchat Torah before we went into Bereshit, so we couldn't physically host one. And another reason is because Bereshit and Noach are the two portions that introduce civilization, introduce the creation, and as a result, both of them have a unique character that really has nothing to do with the Jewish story, so to speak, because Abraham begins in the third portion, and that's when the book of the Torah sort of has an interest for us as a Jewish people, one would think. Nonetheless, the Torah doesn't begin there. It begins with the creation and the first beginnings of the universe and of our earth, and humankind beginning as well. So, we have selected two very vast topics, Torah and science, two topics that require in-depth knowledge in both of them. And to be quite frank with you, I'm a novice in the Torah knowledge, and I'm very basic in the knowledges of the sciences. And if anybody here is a professor of these topics, I'd love to hear from you as well. But I've read a lot on them and listened to a lot on it, and I would happily share with you some of the resources that I've used to create this class this evening. The purpose of this class, you have to share, there's not enough. I didn't realize so many were coming. I thought they were going to be on Zoom, but it's lovely to see you all. The purpose of this class is to give you items from the beautiful gems of the Torah. I'm not coming to indoctrinate you with a particular belief. I want to open your mind to the vast amount of information, stories, ideas that we find in the Torah. All the sources are from the Torah, from different books of the Torah. And we'll give you some reference to it when we are quoting those books. But they are all, and we're trying to do this within 60 minutes as well, mind you. So there's a lot of people on Zoom as well. So welcome to all of you. The way I'm going to give the class is I'm going to talk. And if I'm talking too much, we'll give a break for people to ask and clarify things. It's going to be a bit more difficult on Zoom, so perhaps you could put it in the chat box. But we'll let one or two or three questions at once if they need clarification of any items, and we'll try our best to address them, and I'll repeat them if people can't hear. So, without further ado, welcome to the Bereshit series of our class. The first item on the agenda is from a book called Seder Olam. It happens to be one of my favorite books. The reason why it happens to be one of my favorite books is because the author, Rabbi Heliprin of Minsk, goes through all the sources that give us details of the dates and the times and what took place when it took place. And as a result, we have certain amounts of clarity that we don't just give pieces of information. Oh, there were the 10 plagues. When was the 10th plague? Well, do we know what day of the week it was? Do you know which month it was? How long did the plague last? When did the next plague start? Adam, when was he created on the first day? Was it 12 a.m., 6 p.m.? And he goes through some amazing details in the history of humankind and specifically the Jewish people. And as a result of all his work and many other authors' work, we are able to trace every generation, every year, practically. I mean, there are some debates as to which occurrence happened in the exact year, but roughly the entire history from Adam until today. It's an incredible thing that we've been able to do. And we're going to look at the first 2006 years today, which is quite a lot if you think the last Rosh Hashanah we just celebrated was 5,786 years ago. So it's not within that time, it's quite a lot. And that's the first two portions of the Torah. But if you believe, if you subscribe, or we'll talk about later, to the theory of the Big Bang and then the world and universe coming as a result of that, it's 13 billion years old, or 14 billion years old, in which case these numbers are insignificant in the greater picture of things. So without further ado, we'll have a quick look at our source sheet, week 1, the creation. God brought everything into being, and we see what was created on each day. Day 1, light. Day 2, the sky. And interesting, there's so much commentary on all of these things. For example, let there be light, but was the sun there? The sun's made on day 4. So what's the light? We're not answering now, but we're just giving you some things to think about, because that's not the title of today's class. Year 1, Cain kills Abel. Well, we had the whole creation, but that's one of the stories we have. Adam and Eve cease having children as a result of the feud between Cain and Abel and being banished from the Garden of Eden for eating from the tree. And 130 years later, Adam wakes up again and has his second child, or third child, but second pregnancy of Eve, and Seth is born. Seth is considered Adam 2.0. And we'll talk about that next week when we discuss how Abraham found God and what the God Abraham discovered. Adam dies in the year 930. Apparently he was to live 1,000 years, but 70 of those years were dedicated to King David. Very good. 1056, Noah is born. Not this Noah, but I will, now that you pointed to my son Noah, I will say a thank you to Noah for helping put the resources. Very good. It's the, yeah, well, I'm going to make a note that thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I've gone into these years assuming that this is Rosh Hashanah 5786. We're working on that count of years. So if you take 5,786, and this January will be 2026, and minus, what's 5786 minus 2026? I've done the calculation before you. It's 3760. So our calendar begins 3,760 years before year 0 of our count. So therefore, when you say the world was created 5,786 years ago, it's 3,760 years before the current era that we are counting. So each one you basically do, you'll see before the Common Era, BCE, will be then minus up until beginning at the towards the destruction of the Second Temple is where our years, when the 0 and you start coming into the plus.
Actually happened in 4806.
Wow, there's a good mathematician at the table. 1948, Abraham is born. We missed out. 1656 is the year of the flood. Abraham marries Sarah. 1996 is the year of dispersion of the Tower of Babel. 2001, Abraham and Sarah begin their outreach movement. Again, we'll talk about that more next week. And in 2006, Noah dies, which is minus 1775. So 1,775 years before the current era count of obviously plus 2026. Moses is born in the year 2368. The Torah is given in 2448. The first temple is built in 2928, which is minus 827. Again, we've got all of these years, but I'm giving you a very brief look at it because, again, the main part we're trying to look at is the first week of creation and the first 2,000 years. Very quickly, anybody have any questions? This is not the topic of today's class, but I wanted to open up, although the 7 days of the creation and the experience that took place is, anybody have any quick comments before we move on that, or questions? There's an extra copy now here. Okay, perfect. Thank you for allowing me then to move on to the fun bit. Yeah, sorry.
One of the questions there, people talk about the length of each of these days.
Excellent, yeah.
And the timeline talks about Cain killing Abel in the first year.
Yes.
So regardless of how long the length of those days were, we consider all of that to be before or within the first year.
Yes. So what you now have demonstrated to us, the requirement to hold our questions, because that's the second part of the class of the age of the universe. And one of those, but it's an important point you're bringing up. And the answer on one finger, because we're going to talk about it soon, is yes, according to one opinion, the count begins at Adam. And what happens pre-Adam is a whole different experience. But that's not what the first part of the conversation today is: the Ark and dinosaurs. Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready? Ark and dinosaurs. So Noah builds an ark. Why does Noah build an ark? Because the people of his time are wicked. And as a result, God decides he wants to obliterate an entire creation, as we'll see, including the animals who are acting immoral. And he saves Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. and humanity is reproduced following the flood. The flood lasts, well, the rain is for 40 days, and they spend a year and 11 days inside the ark. Inside the ark, the Torah tells us, the animal kingdom that obviously don't live in the water because the fish would be safe in a flood, but anything that requires oxygen to survive was in the ark. The measurements of the ark are recorded in the Torah. When I was a little boy, I haven't bothered to research it, but I remember watching a cartoon about Noah and the ark, and all the animals were prodding in, and there were some animals that were too big to get in, and they were turned away and couldn't get in, which is really two parts to the question. Number one is, or three parts to the question. Number one, were there dinosaurs? Number two, did they get into the ark? And number three, if they didn't, what happened? Okay, should we do it?
Well, you could draw a parallel whether the dinosaurs were extinct at a
Yes.
certain time.
Yeah.
Therefore, they didn't get into the ark at a certain time.
Well, that assumes that there was a time before. Yeah, but let's go into it. So I'd like to begin by saying a few things. Rabbis use, as marketing people do, creative titles to entice people to come into a class. But we still will discuss this, don't get me wrong. But sometimes we have to go a little bit around to arrive at that detail. The Torah has no shortage of creative animals. And we will look at some of the gigantic creatures and the wonders of creation in our first sources. And then we will look at whether these are dinosaurs or not. You can decide for yourself. But one of them couldn't get into the ark. And when Noah comes out of the ark, it says everything is wiped out. And some of the commentaries say the bones of the dinosaurs were buried at that time. So let's go together on the journey. Number one, large creatures. On the fifth day of creation, God creates the fish and the birds in the sky, and one of them is the Taninim, source one. And God created the great sea monsters. The Hebrew word that's used is tanin, which is also today referred to as a crocodile. And some translations have, in fact, translated it as a crocodile. But that's
one of the oldest recorded animals, actually.
Correct. But the sages in the Talmud, which are quoted in Rashi in source 2, wonder of what the great sea monster is. The great fish in the sea is the first answer that Rashi tells us in source 2. But then he tells us it refers to Leviathan and its mate. For he created them male and female, and he slew the female and salted her away into gefilte fish. Well, no, actually, herring. For the righteous, in the future, there will be, the sages tell us, a dinner party where the Leviathan will be served for the righteous. Pickled or creamed. I think that's the choice you get once you get it at the dinner. Because if they would have more kids, the world would not be able to exist because of them.
I believe God also castrated the male one and did the same for another set of animals.
Correct, and that's brought in the Torah. So the Leviathan, what is the Leviathan? The Leviathan is a huge fish. And it is brought in numerous parts of the Torah of its existence. And as is suggested here, the female one has been put aside in a fridge somewhere, salted, to be served at a meal when the Messiah comes, and the male is somewhere still out in the waters, apparently,
It's the floor of the
potentially, floor of the ocean.
Sort of. What are we talking about?
Don't know.
Massive. You don't know.
I don't know if it's the Coronosaurus. Yes,
in Baba
doubt
Batra, there's quite a few stories about it.
Excellent.
So we can put-
And
Sorry, what?
but I think let's keep it down to the questions when we ask them all together, because otherwise we're going to have loads. But now that we've already started it, please, Sylvia, yes.
That wouldn't mean that God made yet another mistake when he created the woman. I saw that somewhere.
You mean that he made too big of an animal to live in habitat? Yeah. Whether it was a mistake or whether that was God's plan. For us, we cannot. Yes. It's important. It's an important point because what we'll see in one opinion later on is when God does something, it's not a mistake. We just don't understand it. That's the point. But we'll get to that later on in the conversation. Online, I hope everybody's managing. I can't see anybody even. Oh, now I can. Is everybody Can you hear online? I don't see any. I'm sure they can hear. They're all still there. Okay, let us continue.
Can you hear us?
You can hear us
Have you
fine?
moved? We can hear you, but could you repeat the questions, please?
Done. Of course I will. Done. Yeah,
Thank-
absolutely. The questions have not been all that too inspiring yet, so I'm not going to repeat that. Okay, source 3. You can mute yourselves after, just so the recording is good. You don't like cream herring, exactly. Source 3. Remember, we're going through 60 minutes to inspire you with information in the Torah. We're not going to know the answer to everything, but we want to give you it. And you can then go and explore further. You can go and research it further. You can say, that inspired me. This talked to me. I want to know more about this. In Bava Batra, the Talmud lists all sorts, sorts of different incredible things that were animals that were around. And one of them, in source 3, is called on by Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. Once we were traveling on a ship, and we saw a certain fish upon which sand had settled and grass grew on it. We assumed that it was dry land and went up and baked and cooked on the back of the fish. But when the back grew hot, it turned over, and were it not for the fact that the ship was close by, we would have drowned. That's a big fish. In addition to big fish, the Torah speaks of big birds. There's a whole part of that same Gemara, which I didn't quote, but it speaks of the ziz bird. It's like a 5-story, but you've got to read about this ziz bird. The Midrash says this ziz bird was so big that its wings dimmed the sun. And I did a little bit of research on some dinosaurs, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, but maybe the ziz could be a relation of the Orangotaurus or something, because he had really long wingspan. So I told you it was a way to get you in to the class. But here we already see some unusual animals in the Torah. The next page, page 2, I've given you a little box. I'd like you, if you have a pen, to draw a snake with legs and hands and show it to us once you've done it. Draw a snake with legs and hands. Don't take too long over it, because we only have a minute to do this.
Do you have an extra pen?
Maybe it looked like a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something. No, I don't have a pen, sorry. Why do I tell you, what does a snake look with legs and hands? Anybody drawn their picture yet? Any artist?
Yes, because that sort of applied.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Now when you get home, Google a Argentosaurus or something, or a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Looks quite similar. Again, I'm not in any way suggesting that's what it is. But read source 5 with me. The Lord God said to the serpent, remember what the serpent did to Adam and Eve? Because you have done this, cursed be you more than all cattle and more than all the beasts of the field. You shall walk on your belly, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. Says the Rashi, quote, and the Midrash is slightly more specific than text 6. On your belly you shall go. When the Holy One, blessed be he, said, on your belly you shall go, the ministering angels descended and severed its arms and its legs.
Meaning it had them.
Maybe it had them. So there were some big animals. Big creatures, big birds, and big fish. What about mammoths? Yeah, she was on, that's right. Big Bird survived. She's on Sesame Street. I think there's different versions of that Big Bird. Okay. What about big animals? And this is where we're going to get to the Ark. I have to tell you, while I was researching it, one rabbi claims that the next Talmud is speaking of dinosaurs. I don't know how he has. I listened to his class. I wasn't overly. He said dinosaur means a fearfully large animal. That's the translation exactly. Yeah, from Latin. So if it was, maybe this was it. He used it as a concept. But before we do that, in the Torah, we only heard about the large monsters of the sea. It didn't tell us about the large monsters on land. And we know that Judaism believes in demons. In fact, the Midrash tells us the demons were allowed on the ark. Maybe I should have called this class the demons on the ark, because the demons were let on the ark.
The Dybbuk made it to the ark?
I didn't say the Dybbuk. Dybbuk isn't a demon. Dybbuk is a possessive demon. It is a demon-like, but it's a possessive one. But we're not going to talk about that because it's not today's topic. The Maharsha says everything that exists on land has its counterpart in the sea, and the large creature mentioned on the land is the Re'aim. What is the Re'aim? Welcome to the large animal that snorkeled off the ark during the 40 days. Are we ready? Don't need to Google it.
I like to just.
Yeah, he wants to Google. You Google it afterwards.
As we go along.
Okay. Sevachim 14b. There is, by introduction, there is an argument among the sages as to whether or not the flood flooded the land of Israel. In other words, was the whole world under the waters of the flood? Was it just the areas where humanity was? Was Israel spared? The reason why this becomes important is, and I'll let you ask your question in a second, the reason why this becomes important is because there is an animal called the Re'aim that somehow needs to survive, and it can't get on the ark. Yes.
What exactly is a ring? Because in all the
Very good.
Chumash I own, it translates as something different. I think they
The giant
changed it
ox.
from giant ox,
Unicorn.
horned unicorn,
Unicorn,
to,
yeah.
to glorified horse.
Yeah.
Hooray!
Woolly mammoth.
Yeah, woolly mammoth. Oh, we got it. The woolly mammoth. That's what I'm calling him. I'm calling him the giant mammoth. I just made that up, but it could be. Let's have a look at the Gemara. Yeah, thank you. We did need one to represent him on the Triceratops or something. It's another one. The Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who says the flood did not descend upon Eretz Israel, which is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, this is explanation the fact that the Re'ema remained there in Israel and survived the flood. But according to the one who said that the flood descended on the land of Israel too, which is the opinion of Reish Lakish, how did the Re'ema remain? How did he survive? I want to tell you, before we go in, there is something else ginormous that survived. But again, it wasn't in today's topic. His name was Og, Melech HaBashan. Og, the king of Bashan. He was so tall that when he stood on the ark, he would be able to breathe, and he stood on the side of the ark. His brother Sichon, there's two opinions as to where he was, because Sichon was a giant too. Og and Sichon were both battled by Moses when the Jews are entering into the land of Israel.
Mentioned in Shabbat Torah.
They are mentioned
Not eventually killed by
but it's also mentioned in
Yes.
it's mentioned by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe jumps 10 hammers, has an axe of 10 hammers. But that's not the story for today. But it's important because we're going to come to him in this. His brother Sichon, I read today that according to one opinion, his mother, who was giving birth to these giants, was pregnant with Sichon, and Og saved him, according to the Rosh. And Og saved her rather, during the flood as well. So Sichon was born afterwards, and he became a giant. Another opinion is that he actually fathered Sichon with his mother. So these are the weirdest explanations you can come up to that the Torah has. But again, the point of it is for me to give you all of the information, to keep it exciting, and we can go into all of them. And as I will add it now, and I perhaps should have said it before, at the end, I would also like to internalize it into our own life as well, rather than just tell it as stories, and to think about these things, of course, for ourselves as well. So let's go back to the story. How did the Re'ema remain? According to the opinion of Reish Lakish, that Israel was not saved from the flood. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we say this big animal, the Re'ema, which we're not sure what it is, but he's a huge mammoth or a huge animal of some sort. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, he could be in the land of Israel, and that's where he's breathing and eating and surviving. But what about, according to Reish Lakish, that says the entire land was drowned in the seas of the flood?
Live long both the
And so for 40 days and nights, sea lions can manage, I think, a few hours. I don't know, whales. No, not whales. Which other ones come up? I don't know. Frogs. 40 days is a long time. Could be. But the Talmud has another explanation. Let's have a look at it.
Are we allowed to ask a quick question?
Of course you can, because we've completely ruined that rule that went out the window from the beginning. Yes.
Noah's Ark in some way surely must have been like a TARDIS, if you know the TARDIS, Doctor, because these animals are going to grow. Right.
First of all, they are going to grow, but they are going to grow. By the way, you're going to see, according to one answer is maybe they bought the baby. Let's read it.
Yeah.
Given its large size, it clearly could not have fit it into Noah's Ark. Rabbi Yanai said they brought Re'ema cubs into the ark and they survived. Imagine a baby dinosaur that's just come. My daughter has a book called The Baby Dinosaur. You open it, it says, don't turn the page because it's a dinosaur that's going to egg crack and you turn the page and it comes into a horrible dinosaur. But he took the baby dinosaur in the eggs. The Gemara says no. But doesn't Rabbi Bavachana say, I have never seen a day-old offspring. Sorry, I have seen a day-old offspring of the Re'ema, and it was a parsa, and the place where its head rests, i.e. its neck, was a parsa and a half. It cast feces and thereby dammed up the Jordan River. Even the cub would have been too large for the ark. So how did this Re'ema survive the flood? Rabbi Yochanan said they brought only the head of the cub onto the ark, so it was snorkeling, while its body remained outside. But doesn't the master, i.e. Rabbi Balchana, say that the place of the head rest was a parsa and a half? You just said it was huge, his head. He couldn't get his head in the ark. We'll see what it's going to say. He couldn't get his head in the ark.
It's like miles.
How big is the parsa? I did have the measurement, but I didn't print it.
Something.
You can Google on your thing.
One's a person.
Consequently, even the head alone would not fit in the ark. Rather, they brought the head, i.e. the edge of its nose, into the ark so that it might breathe. So it was in this, like breathing, but the rest of it was out. It didn't weigh down the ark. He was afloat, exactly. He was on a little jet ski behind and putting in his nose.
It's 3 miles.
Nearly 3 miles.
Nearly 3 miles.
Miles big.
So his head was that big.
No, his whole body was 120 miles.
But the ark was moving upon the water. How is it possible to keep the nose of the Re'ema in the ark? Practical question. The ark, the moving waters. Reish Lakish said they tied its horns to the ark so that the Re'ema would move with it. That's what you said. The Gemara asked, but doesn't Rav Chisda say that the people of the generation of the flood sinned with boiling heat, were punished with the boiling water? In other words, the water itself was boiling hot. He would have been cooked in this water. You following? So he's hanging on with his nose, snorkeling in with his horns tied, and the water's boiling. How would he have survived? The Gemara says, according to your reasoning, it would be impossible to survive in the boiling water. How did the Og, the king of Bashan, who according to tradition was of the generation of flood, stand? How did he survive the boiling water? Remember I told you that the Og survived? How did he survive? Rather, it must be that a miracle was performed for them, namely that the water on the sides of the ark cooled, allowing the ark, the Re'ema, and Og to survive. So the mammoth, the giant mammoth,
120 miles.
120 miles long, is that what its size was unable to get on the ark, but he wasn't turned away. He was allowed to tie on to the ark and breathe. Who said the Torah didn't have imaginative, creative stories of olden times? So we have dinosaurs or the likes and the species of unusually sized creatures. But we're now actually going to go into some sages who lived during the times when archaeologists, not really archaeologists, there is a word for the paleontologist. Yes, thank you. Paleontologist, is that the word? Yeah. Whose job it is to study bones, study fossils. And they were living in the early times of the study of the fossils. Therefore, they come up with presentations which are not really accepted, that many people question today. But it's to see from the very moment these things were found, the sages, and this is the imagination and the necessity for us to realize. The Torah never ignored what science was providing. It tried to rationalize it. It tried to understand how our stories fits in with it. And as soon as the dinosaur fossils arrived, sages on the Talmud, on the Chumash, start discussing it. Apart from the fact we've got these crazy-sized animals, which we've been referencing that existed, they're actually referring to the fossils themselves. But before we do that, I just want to refer to one more episode of the time of the flood, and I alluded to it before, and that is not only were humans corrupt in their moral standards and their the life that they were choosing to lead, between husband and wife and species and family members, siblings, they were completely immoral. The same was, and that was one of the reasons why Hashem decided to destroy them, so to speak. The same applied with the animal kingdom. To read verse 9 on the bottom of page 2. And God saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupt, For all flesh had corrupted its way on earth, says Rashi, quoting the Medrash, the Tanchuma, even cattle, beasts, and fowl would mate with those who were not of their own species. Again, we're going to use this because one rabbi suggests those big animals that were mating with other animals were producing all sorts of strange species, of which none of them survived. Again?
Like linen and
Sure.
Yes, well, shatnez is the species of our clothing. But yes, the point was it was how they were being able to copulate and have children. I'm not a biologist and I don't know a scientist, and I'm just reading for you what the rabbis tell us. Remember, that's what this class is about. Any questions? We could take a pause here before we go into this. I'm not sure if anybody online has any questions. Nothing in the chat. Anybody have any questions here before we go to the next bit?
So the last bit, sorry.
The last bit was just a quote, which we're going to refer back to soon. And that is that not only was the humankind being immoral in their ways, but the animal kingdom were also breeding with other species, not their own.
And there's the implication that those
Yes.
mix of species. is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
interpret
yeah.
that.
That's what one of these people, one of the rabbis, are going to write. We're going to get to it now.
Are there any pictures of these animals
Oh,
anywhere?
brilliant question. I was waiting for that. Thank you. Who asked that? Brilliant. Are there any pictures?
Oh, no, online.
Hi, brilliant question.
Oh, shalom, shalom.
I've on my research I found some rabbinic I gave everybody in the class here in person, and I don't know if you saw in the box there was a draw your snake with legs and arms, so you could draw your own diagrams. I did see one rabbi who was researching the Re'aim that had drawn imagery that they thought it represented. But they just to remind you, they didn't have fossil collection, so it wasn't like they had bones that they were putting together to describe what they looked. We only have the evidence of the rabbis in the Talmud that we've quoted, and what they claim to have seen when they came off the boat. That was that they ended up landing on the back of a fish. They just describe what happened. They didn't draw us an image of what that fish looked. But you can imagine in a science fiction movie, a fish doing that turn and his boat, and then somehow I don't know how he got off in time to get on the boat. He doesn't describe that drama. Yeah.
The Ark commentary said these stories are just like what's the word?
Metaphors.
Metaphors.
Yeah, so I should have made that disclaimer earlier that the Medrash, the Agadot, are in themselves a topic. We did discuss it in one of our courses where we did the books of the Torah, and we discussed the unique place that the Midrash has. But remember, the point of this class is to explore, give you information, and let your mind wander and come to your own conclusions. What element you want to subscribe to is true and which. I don't know.
There's loads endorsed it, blah blah blah.
I don't know.
California, etc. But
Good question.
yeah,
Yeah. By the way, you could suggest that Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan's argument would be based on that because the animals they had no flood there, according to him, so you wouldn't. But anyway, we'll get to that. Yes.
they were supposed to do. Does that mean they also had free will? Wasn't there the whole thing?
Great question. How were they doing it? Yeah. One thing that it comes quite clear across, and perhaps we'll note it shortly, is that pre-flood and post-flood seem to have been a very different reality. Some basic differences are I mean, there's so many differences, but some of them are Adam wasn't allowed to eat animals. Noah was told that he could. The way the world seemed to have operated pre-flood and post-flood, there seems to be some significant changes. So the animals, did animals have free choice? The way we understand creation to be, the animals didn't have free choice, but they just did what they did. But for whatever reason, it's perhaps the energy of the environment was so corrupt based upon humans' behavior, it dragged the animal kingdom. Drag the animal kingdom too up.
The animals didn't get punished.
Some of them weren't allowed on.
Yeah. Well, according to that opinion, weren't. Yes. It's a great question. I'm going to research that further.
I'm not sure this is correct, but I recall reading something by Maimonides who looked at the Torah pre-Abraham as not being literal, but being metaphorical.
Yeah, so that's another big conversation, and we'll touch on that element of taking things as metaphor and real at the final close of the class, as well, from a particular approach of it. But yes, absolutely, there are sages that have said try to explain things in a metaphoric way. But we as believers, the sons of believers in the tradition of the Torah, believe, as we would say, we have to rationalize things with the reality around us and with science around us, but we believe God creates the heaven and earth, and we believe those stories. Some elements of them would perhaps be metaphor, but we believe Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Adam and Noah.
But, okay, I mean, I think Maimonides might make a difference.
Maimonides in the Guide for Perplexed does have when it does look at explaining things in a particular way, and again, there's lots of debate upon that particular item as well. And there's Maimonides is a rationalist, and he definitely writes very clearly in his fundamental principles of faith that we believe in the Torah of Moses.
He didn't deny that. He just said that this part
Can be explained in a particular way, and we'll see as we go to the age of the world, Earth, of the universe, different rabbis having different opinions how to rationalize those things.
Dinosaur tracks, by the way, Beit Zayit in 1962.
Dinosaur tracks, beautiful. There's the answer. But it also reconciles that they didn't have the flood there because they.
I'm sorry.
It just says here on AI, I think dinosaur footprints discovered in Beit Zayit in 1962, as well as a mosasaur skull discovered in Negev.
Okay, just to update those online in case you're missing, we've been talking about some Maimonides' approach of rationalizing what kind of free choice the animals had that had this immoral behavior between themselves, and whether dinosaurs were found in Israel. That's what we've been talking about. But now let's go on to the next part, fossils. So the verse in this week's Torah portion, Noah, describes Noah coming out the flood on page 3, and what does he see? When he comes out the flood, it says, and the flood blotted out all the beings that were upon the face of the earth. Even though, and the Malbim, who, as I said, is at an age where fossils are starting to become a thing, on page 3, that's page 4, so the one before that, yeah. Even though many of their strong bones, listen to what the Malbim writes, like bars of iron, did not decay because of during the time of the flood. Nevertheless, they were erased from the earth. So he's rationalizing that whilst Noah comes out the flood, there's nothing there, but there are still bones. For through the surge of the water, the carcasses were swept into the valleys, and most were swallowed into the depths of the abyss. As the earth opened its mouth from the great depths of the watery deep, and they descended thousands of cubits into the depths. Thus, when Noah came out the ark, he found no trace of the carcasses of animals, nor the bones of the giants and great beasts that had existed before the flood. So he's made us 2 points here. But large animals that existed before the flood. Number 2, they were wiped out at the flood. Number 3, when Noah comes out, there's no remnants there. And for that matter, thousands of years till there's discovery of the flood of them. And we'll read in the Emek Dava, he gives a suggestion why they were hidden for that long. You can accept this or not, but I'm giving it to you nonetheless. A response to the scholars of geology, which I think you called correctly paleontologists, who dig into the depths of the earth and find large bones of giant and great beasts that vanished from the earth and no longer exist since the days of the flood, and who argue from this the great antiquity of the world. For they imagine that the earth is composed of various layers, concluding that the world is ancient by tens of thousands of years, and the beasts existed in early epochs before our present creation. All this is vanity and emptiness. For at the time of the flood, the earth opened its mouth through the convulsions, that came from the depths of the Sheol and the great abyss. It overturned the lower layers upward and the upward downward, and sank the carcasses of the animals very deep. The wisdom of those who probe and dig to determine the quality of this upheaval is confounded, that which wrought wonders during the 150 days of the water duration. Thus all the systems the scientists arranged regarding the composition of the earth at every layer, and all their calculation were confused at that time.
There was an ice age there as well, wasn't there?
Then was there an ice age? Maybe there was, I don't know. But we're talking about it's certainly not reported in the Torah, the ice age. But what they asked about, it could be, the Malbim is saying here, he's read the news. The news says we have found fossil bones. And he's reading the Torah. And he said, yes, I've seen here in the Talmud that Mendel's quoted of the big giant animals. I've read about the Taninim. I've read about the mammoth that couldn't get on. Clearly, there were big animals, and there were things that were there that didn't make it to the ark. And what else happened during that time was that things were literally wiped out. And because of the level of disruption that he is describing here, those bones from what looked like dinosaurs were of beasts that existed before. Yes, correct. And I think it's really important. Just a note was said here of how they date the fossils, and that's perhaps why he wrote tens of thousands of years, because at that point that's what they thought they were. They hadn't done the dating, and there is a lot to be discussed. And we'll see the Lubavitch Rebbe's approach, where he talks about how there is a process of dating of things aging in a much quicker way, etc., which is accepted by some and not by all. But here again, going back to the point, what do we see from the Malbim? There were dinosaurs. They didn't make it on the ark. So going back to our question, it wasn't just a PR stunt. The ark and dinosaurs, the mammoth, we're calling him the mammoth. Please don't quote me to the rabbis of this, but we're calling him the mammoth. The Re'em survived the flood. Either he was in the land of Israel, according to Rabbi Yochanan, or he was skating along with his horns tied and his nose snorkeling, according to Reish Lakish. But his friends, his mates, people that he had roamed the earth with, their remains, during the time of the flood, were sent down and were later discovered. The Emek Davar Rab Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin in source 13 follows this same approach, but adds two really important points, or in fact three. Number one, he's going to give us an opinion of rabbis that we are going to go back to when we discuss the age of the universe, if we have time, that is, because we're running out of time, that there were worlds that were destroyed before the world that we have today. And those worlds, according to other opinions, were inhabited by other beings. The Emek Dava discredits this opinion because he said when God destroys those earlier worlds, he destroys them entirely, and there is no elements remaining, including fossils. But others want to say that God makes worlds and destroys them, and in those worlds there were fossils. Others suggest those were the earlier beginnings of the universe and of Earth. Others, as we will see, based on the Arizal, deny that those worlds that God made from the Kabbalistic point were physical. They were all spiritual of nature. But that's for another time, for later on. Rather, let's go to the big bold area. I've told you the first opinion. Rather, middle of 13, source 13, on page 3. Rather repeat that these bones are from before the time of the flood. And although they are found in climates where such creatures did not live now, that is because before the flood, beings had deviated from the natural paths on the earth and migrated elsewhere. The Great Migration. The discovery of strange creatures is due to interbreeding of different species, producing hybrid beings like the mule born of a horse and a camel. Divine providence willed that these bones should remain, so that a later generation would uncover them and gain insight into the hidden workings of nature, which is the glory of the Creator. So, he's suggesting, according to this translation, that it was to get the hidden working of nature. Another reason that he says, or other people reread the words of the Emek Dava to suggest that future generations should learn of the mistakes of the interbreeding of previous generations of the flood, and they were hidden for that reason. However, at the time it was God's will that they would be erased from earth entirely, so they will not be seen. People would then attempt to reproduce and construct such beings anew. Therefore, Scripture adds, and they were obliterated from the earth, meaning providence ensured that the unusual bones would not be found in that generation or for many generations, so that no one would attempt to recreate them. What exactly he's referring to here is hard to imagine and understand. Is he suggesting that they could rebreed, re-interbreed, and recreate these dinosaurs that had been blotted out before the flood? I don't know, but it's amazing to see that the rabbis wanted to talk about this. And that's why we're doing it here today, to understand that these things are discussed. I'm not telling you it's correct scientifically. I'm not trying to convince you that there were dinosaurs or there weren't dinosaurs. I'm just showing you the beauty of our Torah, that the rabbis discuss this and take it seriously. Any questions before we move on to the next part? I will make a synopsis just before we do. Number one, we began by giving us a brief history of time, We then went to the creation of sea monsters and other strange looking species and different sizes from the fish, from the birds, and from the animal kingdom. We even met our friend, the Ra'aim, and his particular personal journey with the Ark. And then we went into the destroyed species, as the Torah describes, and the two sages of the 17th, 18th century who suggest, 18th and 19th century, who suggest that those fossils were created from that time. Any points before we move on? And we've only got 15 minutes left to do the last bit. Anybody want to make any comments, or should we move on? Okay. Everyone okay online? They're still there. 15 of them are still there, so obviously they can hear the fun that we are having here. Let's go on to the second topic, the age of the universe. I began with a disclaimer, and the disclaimer was that I'm not a scientist. The disclaimer was that I am short in knowledge of the Torah, how much more so I am when it comes to these great big debates, of which I have 5 books in the car, I forgot to bring them in, that I've read and reread, and each time I'm trying to understand them anew, of sages and rabbis from the modern era and from previous eras that look to rationalize science and religion, creation, and the belief that we have of all these beautiful books on the Torah bookshelf of the word of Hashem and the reality that we live. So during this last 50 minutes, my attempt is not in any way to answer these big questions, but to give you a couple of nice examples of them that you can take away. If you want to subscribe that the universe is 15 billion years old and the world is 4 billion years old, you have rabbis in which you can rely. And if you want to say that no, the world is 5,786 in its most literal way, and humanity is as old as that, and the first musical instruments were from the descendants of Adam, and the first building of houses were from his descendants too, as we read last week in the Parsha, then you can subscribe to that as well and find a solution. I'm going to give you the information, and you can process it as you want. There are more opinions in all of this. I've selected a couple that I would like to share with you today. We mentioned that God destroyed worlds and recreated them. The first approach that we're going to look at is developed specifically in a writing that I read by the great Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who is a tremendous author that only lived, I think, 36 years, but translated Sefer Yetzirah, translated the Living Torah, produced amazing amounts of work during his short life. And he has a book that he wrote on this topic. He brings together differing opinions to bring a calculation of how the world is some 15 billion years old. And this is how it goes. Midrash Rabbah, source 14. Rabbi Baal says this teaches us that God, he continuously creates worlds, top of page 4, and destroyed them until he created the current one. And he said, this one pleases me. Those did not please me. It says worlds. One assumes, does that include the entire universe? Let's say it does. We live it in the world, but as the world lives within a universe. The sages, and specifically,
Okay,
of course.
What's the noun they use for the world?
Olamais. The Kabbalists look at it as Loshen Helem Vehester, where God's, that's another, we'll say that for another Hasidic class. The Tiferes Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz, has a essay that he writes where he speaks of an aged world using this theory. And it's further developed by the works of the Sefer Tumunah and early Kabbalists, some suggest from the time of the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yitzchak Akko, who is a middle-aged disciple of Nachmanides, and a verse in the Psalms. Assuming the Sefer Tumunah says that these worlds that God destroyed were actually 6. We are in the 6th of those worlds. Each one of those worlds exists for 7,000 years. If you calculate that, the world is 42,000 years old. I mean, not this world, because this world is the world of a created world. Was it that, according to him, all of this all this happened on this earth, on this world? Or was it the whole cosmic development on this planet? Sorry, on this world. Yes, correct. On the whole cosmic from the Big Bang and on. Well, we read in the previous work of the Emek Davar that he thought they were destroyed entirely. There was no remnants left. But maybe those were disruptions and eruptions. Who knows? But that was the first stage of the cycle of 42,000. Rabbi Yitzchok of Akko went further and he said, these years aren't our human years, but they're 1,000 years. Why is that? Quoting from Psalms, for 1,000 years are in your eyes like yesterday, which then means we have, that's how we get to the 42,000. We then multiply those years we then take the 42,000 of the 7 times 1,000 and we multiply it by each day of those years, because remember, each day is 1,000 years. You then come to 365,000 or so, which means 42,000 years of 360,000 years, and that roughly gets you to 15 billion. Again, I don't know what happens during those 15 billion. What are these worlds? Is it just what we read in by the works of Stephen Hawking and those that discovered how time journeyed from the Big Bang and with it the creation? There's a great book called The First 3 Minutes, I think, and it tells you how in such a short amount of time, one of the great reads of the early beginnings of the universe, and the amount of things that takes place in 3 minutes of the creation as the Big Bang Theory looks at it, forgetting Hashem's creation. So you can imagine all of these things can happen in all sorts of time, because time is a word that operates within the structure that we are living, looking at our watch, that we only have 10 minutes left of this class. But that is how one theory suggests it. Dr. Gerald Schroeder, who's a great scientist and writes a lot for Aish, I believe, or Simmeach, I'm not sure which yeshiva, but he suggests that before Adam, and somebody else mentioned this before, all the time pre-Adam was considered the cosmic time, and therefore there's 5.5 trillion days, because he's using the nucleosynthesis timing, where the ratio is 1 to 1 trillion. If you measure time as it's measured at the nucleosynthesis level, 1 second translates to 1 trillion. Don't ask me what that means. I'm just quoting what the great minds say. And if you then take that cosmic time of the 5.5 trillion days or half of the day, because Adam arrives halfway through the day, if you take that time pre-Adam, also you have 15 trillion years, because time starts when Adam comes. I'm just giving you the different people and their debate things that are out there. Yes.
Wouldn't a more simple explanation be that before day 4, there was no sun and moon, therefore days wouldn't have been the same length as now?
Great. If you read, so Rabbi Kaplan in his essay does speak about that. Correct. And it's in my book over there. But Rabbi Kaplan in his essay describes each one of the 6 days. There's another great book called In the Beginning by Professor Natan Aviezer. Also a wonderful book that describes exactly that. Because we said, let there be light, and we said there was no sun when we started the class. So what's that about? So are those are energies and gases being expressed. So 100%, there are those that put those. What's that? No, the moon came later too. Yeah.
Dating and the emphasis of the Torah is also about the story of man rather than the story of the world. And Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of
Exactly.
Harishon. So it's very mainstream.
Exactly. That we should be taking it from the start of time. I want to say 2 things. I want to say 1 point. All the different theories that try to rationalize and bring together science and religion have to do 2 things. Either they have to squeeze science to fit into religion, or they have to expand religion to fit into science. You don't agree? So tell us. I want to hear Mitch.
If you think of the Torah as divinely inspired word, whether it's literally true or not, there's a universe of knowledge in each pasuk, right? So whether we were the question is, so I like what Rashi says. In the beginning means in the beginning of beginning, which means every day you wake up, supposed to be like Hashem, create and renew your world. You do it when we wake up, you maybe do that thing, right? That you got me to
By the
do.
way, for those online who can't hear, Mitch is just pitching to be the rabbi. Continue.
Oh, I'll be too well.
No, you're saying a very important point. And Mitch is saying that, and I think that was how I began the class, and I'm going to reiterate it now. Everybody should be able to go away from this feeling a measure of pleasure, of experience and depth that exists, not just in the Psukim, which you're talking about, Mitch, which is true, but also in the commentators and their desire to try and understand all of these things and make sense of it, and also find inspiration from it, even when sometimes there's a conflict that's there. And we're going to conclude with the last opinion of the Rebbe, only because I want to bring it out for two purposes. The second one is that it's exactly what Mitch is saying that I think is so critical. Often people use the challenges that they have with the reality around them and the science and religion as an excuse to move away from religion.
Much rather move away from.
I'm not suggesting you are at all, but that's why it's so important to have the conversation within the context of the Torah. Because what we want to do is we want to inspire ourselves to be more excited about the beautiful world that we are not afraid of exploring. We're not afraid of reading the stories about and saying this one makes sense and this one looks like nonsense. This belief I want to subscribe to and I want to take literal, and this one I want to suggest it's another way. But ultimately, it's about realizing that it's the Hashem's Torah, and we want to connect to it with an utmost belief and commitment, even though some of the things that we now experience may become in the fall in front of in face of it and challenge it from the way we perceive it in its literal way. But what I'd like to say is that we can and should also potentially look at it in its literal way. And this is because the Arizal, Alan Roth raised his hand. Sorry, Alan, please go. You're on. Sorry.
If we believe in miracles such as the burning bush, or that Aaron threw the cane down in front of Pharaoh and turned into a snake, why should we not believe that some elements of creation were miracles? Why are we never discussing the fact that the stick turned into a snake, but we argue all the time whether the creation this and the creation that?
I'll just repeat what Alan said. It's beautiful. He wasn't talking to you, Mitch. He was talking to everyone. And I want to say, I'm going to repeat what he said. And I'm going to add a point to what Mitch says, because to what you're saying, Alan, because also one of the things that Maimonides brings up. Alan, who's a professor, by the way, says the following point. There are some miracles we're happy to believe happened. He mentioned the one of the burning bush and the throwing of the stick. What about the splitting of the Red Sea? Everybody here believes that we had the splitting of the Red Sea. That's how we came out of Egypt. So why are some miracles we're happy to subscribe to and others not? By the way, Maimonides I think it's Maimonides, but Toby, I might be wrong. Who is it that says that the whole story with Moshe and throwing the sticks was a metaphor? I think that might be the very one that Maimonides brings as an example. The Rambam doesn't hold of magic. By the way, and I read somewhere else that this stick was the Taninim. That the whole thing that we've been talking about here in the beginning was that what that stick turned into. So we're going full circle of what was that tannin turned into, this magic animal that we don't even know what it is, crocodile or monster, as the translator said. Thank you, Alan, for that great point. And that actually leads into another point, which we're going to see in the Rebbe's analysis. The Rebbe had a degree and understood science far better than I did. But in the first part of it, by way of introduction, according to the Arizal, the world, when we say God creates and destroys worlds, it's not literal, it's spiritual worlds. And if it's in spiritual worlds where it's happening, we can't say that it happened in this world. There is only one world that was ever created, and we are in it. There were spiritual expressions of godliness that were then destroyed and were not part of the spiritual structure of the reality that we are in. But the physical world, as we know, there was only ever one created according to their reason. And just to throw one more point out there, as far as halachic Judaism is concerned, the way halachic Judaism works is there could be a debate on something, but once halacha writes an opinion, that opinion trumps all the arguments of prior time. That's not to say we don't learn the argument. We want to know all of the opinions, but all of those opinions are shelved in the sense of when it comes to our activity. Our action always follows the rabbis of the generation that fixed the laws, even though we want to discuss the debate. And therefore, the Kabbalistic debate is very much settled, according to a lot of opinions, by the Holy Arizal. And therefore, if we follow his particular path, we can't say that the world is destroyed in the spiritual, in the physical context. I'm just giving out there another approach. Remember, I'm not indoctrinating you. I'm giving you different approaches and different views. The Rebbe suggests the argument from discovery of fossils. The Rebbe puts two things in one, both the fossils and the age of the universe. You can read it yourself, AB, and I can send you the full letter as well. And there's a full book of the Rebbe discussing science. And the two arguments that the Rebbe makes is, first of all, atmosphere pressures and temperature and radioactivity could have caused things of an ordinary process of nature not to be very different, and therefore dinosaurs existed 5,722 years ago, when the Rebbe wrote this letter in 1962, and became fossilized under terrific natural experience, cataclysms.
He wrote the letter the year that thing was found in Israel.
Yes. Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. In the course of a few rather than in millions of years. And here you see the Rebbe's writing millions, not tens of thousands like the Malbim, because the Rebbe's seen the sciences. Since we have no conceivable measurements of criteria of calculations under those unknown conditions. So the Rebbe's questioning the way science is coming to the conclusions. Number B. One second. Well, in engineering. In engineering. B, even assuming that the period of time which the Torah allows for the age of the world is definitely too short for the fossilization, even though, although the Rebbe doesn't want to accept that, we can still readily accept the possibility. And this is a really interesting point of which Rabbi Kaplan doesn't like, and that is that God created ready fossils, bones, and skeletons for reasons best known to him. Just as he could create ready living organisms, a complete man, and such ready products as oil, coals, or diamonds, which without any evolutionary process, the Rebbe's assuming there's no evolution. As for the question, and Sylvia was touching on a similar thing before, if it be true of the above B, why did God have to create fossils in the first place? The answer is simple. This is the Lubavitcher Rebbe answering it. The answer is simple. We cannot know the reason why God chose this manner of creation in preference to another. And whatever theory of creation is accepted, the question will remain unanswered. The question why create a fossil is no more valid than the question why create an atom. Certainly such a question cannot serve as a sound argument, much less a logical basis for the evolutionary theory. So, a scientist won't necessarily accept that, but the Rebbe's suggesting that what the scientist says doesn't necessarily need to be conflicting with his belief, just because the scientist says it. Yes?
I'm pretty sure one of the previous popes gave, what's the word for a Christian drasha?
What's the drasha? A drasha.
A Christian drasha.
Yeah.
A sermon. They gave a sermon on how like fossils were put there by God to test humanity's faith.
Yeah.
Something.
Could be. So he may have taken it. So it might be.
It's,
by the way, I don't know that there are others that have made this argument. Again, I'm only bringing Torah sources, so we can delete the last 30 seconds because we are only discussing Torah sources. I want to conclude because I've got to keep to the timing, otherwise people won't come back next week. Well, I hope they were inspired enough to want to come back again with all of this information. But the conclusion, this is the beginning of that same letter. And this is what we were saying before. And thank you, Mitch, for highlighting it before. It was quite a surprise to me to learn that you are still troubled by the problem of the age of the world. And the Rebbe says it's a theory. For it's necessary to bear in mind line 3. First of all, that science... Okay, let's go to the second section. It was especially surprising to me that, according to the report, the said problem is bothering you to the extent that it is trespassed upon your daily life as a Jew, interfering with the actual fulfillment of the daily mitzvot. I sincerely hope that the impression conveyed to me is a mistake, for as you know, the basic Jewish principle of Nasa first and Nishma afterwards makes it mandatory upon a Jew to fulfill Hashem's commandment, regardless of its understanding. And I think it's really important to come to that with all these stories, with all these uncertainties where we think we understand all of it. We understand Rambam, we convince ourselves we understand Maimonides, we want to subscribe to him. We convince ourselves we can understand the Malbim, we want to subscribe to him. I don't. I'm just presenting you them because they're different theories that are out there. But first and foremost, we say Hashem created the heavens and earth and gave us the Torah, and we want to do that Torah, and we will keep that Torah. How we experience it and how we rationalize it and which area of the Torah we choose to journey into, to broaden the depth of our knowledge and the knowledge of the world in synthesis with it. Because remember, all the rabbis have done that. No rabbi has said here, this is rubbish, don't read it. I mean, the Malbim was a little bit inflammatory toward it, the approach, but ultimately was recognizing that these discoveries were being made. And these were rabbis that believed that Hashem gave the Torah, that had smart brains, and they could read the sciences of their time and understand it certainly better than I could. And ultimately, they remind us that this is a beautiful Torah that Hashem has given, and we're going to journey in it together. And there is the Ark and the Dinosaurs and the age of the universe in 60 minutes or so. And next week we will go on to how old was Abraham when he discovered God, and we'll talk about one of my favorite topics. A lot of people assume that religion, or the God of Adam, the God of Abraham, was the result of pagan gods, of years of random nonsense worship. I will suggest and prove to you from the Torah's chronology that it was the other way around. The gods of the pagans came as a result of the one God when people wanted to monetize faith and gain their own power. That's what we'll discuss next week. And one other thing, the minted coin of Abraham. You don't want to miss next week's class. Thank you for signing in today. And we wish you all Erev Tov. We'll continue with questions here. I'm going to stop the recording. So if anybody wants to stay online, they can ask questions as well.